This meeting of the Waco ISD Board of Trustees is hereby called to order. I see that a quorum is present. I've already seen Mr. Sykes, Mr. Manning, and Ms. Houston. Additional board members may join us as others as well. This meeting is available as a video and audio conference in accordance with the governor's suspension of certain open meeting requirements to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Oh, Mr. Vidania has joined us as well. In accordance with the suspended rules, we certify that members of the public can watch this online on our website. Members of the public can sign up to offer public comment on any matter posted on our agenda, as is normal practice. Members of the public were given instructions to submit comments in writing to Joshua Woocher by 9 o'clock this morning. All the board members, we're all participating by video conference application, including members of the board. Ms. Cordaweg has joined us as well. And everything to be discussed tonight's been posted in accordance with state law. If you have any questions about the suspended open meeting requirements, you may contact the Office of the Attorney General by calling 888-672-6787 or by emailing toma@oag.texas.gov. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us. We'll get right to it so we can get finished on time. So I think I'm kicking it over to you, Dr. Kincannon.
Yes, I just want to say hello to everyone this evening and welcome you back for our second meeting of the Community Advisory Committee. Thanks again for participating as a part of this committee. Heard some really nice comments about our first meeting and how much you all enjoyed being together. And it was really exciting for me as well. Tonight, we have quite a bit to get done, and I'm going to pass to our architects who will lead this evening, and then we'll have also have a piece, I'll have a piece later, as well as our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Mrs. Dina Kornblum. So with that, I'll pass it to Jared Sturzinger.
And Jared, if I might, I just want to remind everybody that if you have a question, put it in the chat and we'll see if we can't answer questions as they arise. And then if there's something that you would like more information about, put it there as well. We might not be able to get it to you tonight, but we'll get it to you as soon as possible. Okay, Jared, all yours.
Well, and if you will go to the next slide, your comment is right on point of meeting etiquette. And so if you have comments, parking lot is a great thing there. But ultimately, we are trying to start and finish on time, have great participation like we had last time, and overall just have fun and learn about the Waco ISD facility. So should be good stuff here as we move forward. The next slide shows us we're on track for our meetings here. So we're on meeting number 2. So we're finishing up this one and we'll look forward to the next few meetings here over the coming months. You know, in short, we're planning on meeting about every 2 weeks from here. But tonight, our agenda really is going to focus around the Waco ISD facilities condition assessment, which I'll present. We'll turn it over to the district educational vision with Dr. Kincannon and Dina. And then we'll finish up with 21st century learning environments moving forward. And then if you will, 2 slides, we'll get started here. And I will say with that great participation, we were actually able to give out 7 gift cards to 7 lucky people, but we have an 8th that we would love to get out, but we couldn't identify the individuals whose phone number ended in 6899. So if that is you, if you will let us know in the chat, we will get you a little present coming your way, and just a thank you for participating in this great opportunity here moving forward. So tonight, we're really going to be working on the basics of the facility master plan, of getting to know Waco ISD. We began this process roughly a year ago with the district in stepping through the facility assessment, educational suitability and vision, and working through demographics and capacity. And so over the next 2 evenings, we will be covering this content. And I really want to call this as setting the table. And that's really, I think of it kind of like a Thanksgiving meal here. Is you see the first great thing come out and you want to load your plate up, but you really need to let everything come out on the table. Bring your plate and get a little bit of the ham, a little bit of the salad. And we know that the facilities master plan is going to end up the same way. Is there's going to be a lot to chew, but there's always leftovers at the end of the day. So you got to make the right choices so you get a chance to eat that pumpkin pie or that apple pie. There in the top left of the screen. So we're excited for tonight. It is a lot of information and we're going to jump right into it. And so we're going to start off with the facility conditions assessment in that portion of setting the table. So this process was started about a year and a half ago, and the district hired partners, Dude Solutions and Alpha Facility Services. And this group of individuals went campus by campus to do a site and infrastructure assessment. What are they doing? They're basically looking at the sticks and bricks of the entire facility. What condition are they in? Doing an equipment inventory so they understand how old the HVAC equipment is, when it needs to be replaced, ultimately turning that information into preventative maintenance schedules, meaning that you're replacing the roof on a regular cycle, and then as well as inputting this data into the capital planning software. So the Waco ISD facilities team not only has this information, but they're able to capitalize on the information in planning and moving forward so that you can strategically address the needs within the district. So where did they do this? They did it at over 117 permanent facilities through Waco ISD across 30 campuses. So when we talk about campuses like Waco High School, they have 7 or 8 buildings just because they've been added onto, and we can look and study each building individually on every campus to understand what has challenges, what has opportunities, and how do we move forward. This is spread across just about 2.7 million square feet of buildings that were constructed between 1910 and 2012. So quite the lifespan there. So district has some facilities that are 110 years old at this point, but the average is roughly 51 and the median age is 60 plus years. Lots of data, lots of information. So not only is it electronically, but it's in over 1,000 pages of FCA data going campus by campus going through here. Luckily, we're not going to ask you to read any of that information. We'll summarize it for you here tonight. And that information really covers, you'll see here's all the systems, the sticks and bricks from the exterior systems like roofs and windows through the HVAC equipment to keep the space cool or hot. And then as you'll look down in the bottom section, that really is each one of the individual elements that were evaluated and rated moving forward. This really became a pragmatic approach to evaluating the districts and able to then translate this information not only into cost, but an understanding of how it impacts the overall buildings. So yes, if you'll go to the next slide, this allows us to start identifying which campuses need significant improvements. You'll see that on the left, to campuses that need minor improvements along the way. There is a gradation, and we'll continue to present this along the way, but you identify all of those 30 campuses end up fitting into one of those buckets along the way. Of course, age has a little bit of something to do with it, that, older buildings need a little bit more love than some of the newer buildings. But as we look out and think about that 20-year cycle, even your newer buildings that were built in 2012 will need improvements coming in, say, 2032 when the roof warranty is at its end, and need to start thinking about improvements there. So we have pragmatic approach address from that side. Next segment is then costs. And I wanted to give a little primer when we talk about facility cost at this time, and really want to make sure that when we're talking about cost in relationship to a facility master plan, we're talking about total project cost. So not just what it would cost to build the building, and that's kind of the second category there, the sticks and bricks to be able to building, but we want to think about it comprehensively of paying for site or land that may be required, survey starts falling into that category. You of course have hard cost, but then you also get into the soft costs there of FF&E, making sure that you understand that there's furniture that has to go in the building, all the way into developmental cost, design service fees, permit fees, technical and construction materials testing. And so we look at that comprehensively. And so whether you're talking about facility master plan or the bond program, that we are making sure that it's a guarantee not to exceed price for the total project along the way. So as we look specifically to the facility condition assessment, I wanted to identify that there are three kind of takeaways as we look at the cost that you'll see here on the next page. That first is this is a like for like replacement. So as you go through the cost, it means that you're taking a 12 SEER HVAC unit and then potentially replacing it with a 12 SEER HVAC unit. This is not including energy efficiency along the way. It's not potentially addressing code required improvements. The other element that isn't included in these costs is inflation. So of course, everybody's looking at the graph here, and the graph identifies those costs district wide. So across the 30 facilities, what does this look like over the next 20 years? And you'll notice that there are two elements to the graph. At the bottom, you'll see the dark gray, and that represents the year by year cost that the FCA identified. And as you look at that, then cumulatively year over year, or adding year to year, that's the red portion of the graph. And I'd say that there are two major takeaways from this as well. The first, you'll see that there's a large gray bar at the beginning, and that means that there's a considerable amount of improvements needed to be able to address immediate needs, meaning that some of your systems are outdated and need improvements along the way. And then as you fast forward out to about that 2029, 2030 time period, you'll notice that those numbers start increasing. And that speaks directly to the systems and the work that has been put in place over the last 10 years, and the maintenance the district has done is some of that will have to continue to come back over that time period. So you'll see that then there's a dramatic increase at that time that the buildings still need to be maintained along the way. You'll see three nomenclatures, and we'll come back to these numbers here in the future. But if you did the entire work of the FCA, soup to nuts, beginning to end, you'd see the 160 million, the 90 million, and the 350 million would be the cost represented by 2024 through 2034 in terms of total project cost and dollars. Lots of information there. So what do we do with this information here on the facility condition assessment? So we have the pragmatic approach. We understand the cost and approach. So it's time to start thinking as a committee about how we start addressing this. And I want to create a parallel allusion to vehicles. So here you have a 1964 Chevy Malibu, dependable, great vehicle. At this point, it's a classic car. And ultimately, though, it meets the fundamental needs of getting you from point A to point B. From a facility parallel, this is the average age of a Waco ISD facility. So as we fast forward here to the future and we start thinking about, okay, that 64 Malibu in terms of today, we need to think about the ongoing maintenance like oil changes, body repairs, or maybe even you've let it lag a little bit, or maybe you bought it as a classic car. You need to maybe rebuild the engine or go through drivetrain improvements or seat replacements to make it more comfortable. And so as we look at the Waco ISD facilities, so this may mean very similar that you're doing site improvements or roof replacement from an ongoing maintenance, or maybe there's some significant overhauls from the electrical distribution or adding fire suppression systems to make the building more safe. So the key question then is, okay, if we've taken this 1964 vehicle to the future, how does it support us? We always want to compare that to a modern day facility. You start thinking about elements like gas mileage, safety, those type of elements, even little bells and whistles like OnStar maybe. But then in a new facility, we need to think about meeting modern educational needs, HVAC and efficiency might come into play, or ADA accessibility and building codes. So as we continue through the process, we'll again relate the FCA data from beginning to end as we start weighing out other options with facilities. I know that there were a few facilities that we identified last time, so we'll start bringing comparison about what it is to maintain, what it is to be able to support the best educational opportunity, and then all the way to what is that opportunity cost for a new facility. So lots of information there covered in a year plus worth of work in about 15 minutes. But we want to start taking a poll for the group and, just want to get a pulse of the community of overall. We want to look at Waco ISD facilities and are they meeting the needs of students and teachers? And will they continue to meet those needs over the next 10 to 15 years? So another activity here, so you'll see the directions at the top. We'd love for you to participate and answer. You'll see A through E from unlikely to meet the needs over that 10 to 15 year period to very likely to meet those needs over a 10 to 15 year period. So we'll give you a second to be able to look at that. Looks like we've had about half the people respond here at this point. So this information is important to us a lot because it gives us an understanding of where you're at within the community, be able to move forward. And looks like the majority of individuals are thinking that we'll need to make some changes to be able to help support the facilities here moving forward. All right. We will switch over to the next section here and talk about the district educational vision. But if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Concannon and Tina.
Great, thank you, Jared. Good job. Took me a minute to get my answer in for the poll. I had to remember how to text into that. So I don't know if anyone else was having that issue, but I appreciate you giving a little extra pause there. I just want to start, and then I'll pass it to Dina Kornblum, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. But I want to start by talking about our mission and our vision statement. We decided back about a year ago, just prior to the pandemic, that we would revisit our mission and vision statement. And what we found was that we hadn't been talking about the existing mission and vision statement, and we didn't really know what our mission and vision statement was. So we began to talk about where we were headed as a district. And I had two groups of administrators who talked about this over a 2-month period. And then we discussed this with the board and got their input. And then the board adopted a new mission and vision statement. And our new mission is to provide an educational foundation that empowers and values all. And the thought behind that was that we all want to grow. And so what I heard from our leaders from across the district was that we want every person in our school district to grow. That's our students and our adults. And we want everyone to be empowered. and we began to talk about equity and diversity and inclusion. So that statement, I think, accurately reflects our desire for inclusion and for growth of all, whether that be kids or adults. And of course, that vision would be the outcome of that mission statement. And that vision would be to grow students and staff to create a better future for all. So if we're all growing and improving, then hopefully the outcome for the future is better. And that's what we want for our kids. So I'm going to pass it to Dina Kornblum to build on that and talk about what education might look like with that mission in mind.
All right, thank you. Good evening. So as Dr. Buchanan said, when we reworked our mission and vision, and we really use that to guide our work and to think about what that means for us and the future, it really makes me reflect deeply on the words from the mission about empowering and valuing all. And then as Dr. Buchanan said, to lead back to creating that better future. And so on the slide that was just up, you'll see that in 2015, there was a report done. It was actually in 2016, but top industry leaders were surveyed by the World Economic Forum, and they were asked, what are the most important job skills that you're looking for in your workforce? And so as you can see in 2015, we have a set of 10 there. And so those are skills that sometimes we might refer to as soft skills. But the idea is that our workforce is changing, our jobs are changing. And there are jobs that we have today that in 5, 10, and Jared even said, we need to be thinking about 15 years down the road, even in our long range planning, jobs that don't even exist today that will likely be commonplace for us, come time. And so we have to think about, as an educational entity and those who are preparing our students for the future, how do we keep pace with that? What do we do to ensure that we are providing our students with the very best and the skills that are desired so that they have the ability to choose their path come time for them to make that decision? Let me go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So the same group of industry leaders, and these were leaders that were surveyed from some of our, from global companies from across industries. And as you can see, when they were resurveyed in 2020, the list of job skills and those attributes had already changed just in 5 years. And when you look to the left in 2015, you see that quality control and active listening were on the list, but in 2020, those two had fallen off. Not that they aren't important, they just weren't in the top 10 any longer. And then we see that emotional intelligence, which wasn't in the previous list, and cognitive flexibility had been added. So how do we ensure that we are providing learning opportunities for our students to develop these competencies and in the way we teach and how we lead our classes? And so we thought about that, and we are very adamant and sure that we want our graduates, not just that we want them to be, but they need to be creative problem solvers. They need to be skillful team members, and I'll talk more about each of these in a little bit. They have to be effective communicators, confident lifelong learners, informed citizens, and then ultimately well-rounded individuals. And so it's our responsibility to ensure that we're able to do that and to cultivate that in our students. So I'm going to break it down just a little bit by attribute and look at what does it mean to be a creative problem solver. So we often think about school as teaching. We offer content, and those are content would be the things that we might refer to as our hard skills. Those are the things that can be learned, but they're also the things that can change. And another thing that the global leaders mentioned in their report was that, Currently they're thinking how to retrain those types of skills with the workforce. And those skills are a little bit more narrow, but the skills that you'll see on your screen are skills that can be taught and can be learned, but they're very flexible. So when we're looking at problem solving, we're really wanting to create the learner that is able to engage in conflict resolution. They're creative in their problem solving. They're able to weigh their options and reason. They have problem sensitivity. They're able to look at a situation and understand how a solution might impact others and what their place is in that decision. Mathematical reasoning, visualizing. If we did this, what would this look like? As they weigh options and really grapple with information. Having good judgment and decision-making skills. And then of course you have the underpinning of that with content knowledge. I'm going to connect that in a little bit when we get to a slide just ahead of this. And then skillful team members. Being a team member and able to work in problem solving as a part of the group is one of the top rated skills that is going to be needed in the future for our students. So you see active listening is still there and something that we do want to develop because that's a part of being a good team member, but then also being able to think critically, monitor yourself and understand the part you play in the team, coordinate with others, having an emotional intelligence, understanding how to recognize how you provide information to others and how that impacts them, and then how you receive information, being able to negotiate situations, and then of course service orientation. We think a lot about servant leadership, effective communication. Really, without going through every single bullet, what is going to be so critical in this area is that our students are able to communicate in multiple ways and be flexible with that. And so they're going to have a literacy around information literacy, media, and technology, knowing how to not just consume those things, but then take that information and then communicate through those same vehicles. And so how do we take that in, and then how do we effectively use those to communicate our ideas? Lifelong learners, this one is so critical because we only have our students for a little while. And so we're trying to and want to develop these types of learning experiences. But then when they leave us, the hope and the goal as we've provided them with the foundation that then they can take and be very discretionary about what they need. So because of kind of their cognitive flexibility, this is where I am in my situation, this is what I know about me, this is what I know that I need to do to get better and to learn, and knowing what they need to do to help themselves in that area. And so that's important, developing learners that are self-aware in that way. And then not last, it's just last on the list, but is developing informed citizens. So citizens who are directed toward a service orientation, they're not only aware of self, but they have a cultural and global awareness and understand their place and how they impact that, having empathy for others, and then understanding their personal and social responsibility within that system, and the implications that has for society. And so those are things that through the learning that we create for students that we want to develop. Now, what I will tell you is that these are long-term goals. And so if you've looked at our district improvement plan right now, we're focusing a lot on foundational things because it's really important to implement strong systems and have that as our bedrock and our foundation to move forward. But we have to be poised and ready for that and be thinking about how will that look and what do we need to be effective for our students. So I think sometimes some of these skills or these attributes get connected to high school. You know, their students are older, more mature, and maybe they can apply these things more readily. But actually, these attributes begin in their development in elementary. And that's especially important if we are looking at creating students who are flexible in this knowledge and able to use these attributes in different ways. And so it begins in elementary, and then it continues through middle school with greater depth, and then into high school. Now, what our work is deciding, okay, how does that look in CTE? How does that look in advanced academics? How does that look for our middle school students, and what opportunities are we providing them to be able to use and put these skills and attributes to work? Are we? And so that's a part of our long-term visioning and the long-term work that we have to do as we create our plan to put these things in process as we move into the future. And so that bleeds into every sector of our, of our education, from fine arts and even to athletics. Think about some of the things that I mentioned on the list and how many of those things are involved in team sports. And so there isn't a section of what we do that isn't touched in one way or another by those attributes. So moving to the future, we have to think about how we want learning in WISD to look. And so what you're looking at here is the learning pyramid. And a little bit ago, I said I would talk about this a little more deeply when I was talking about content. And so, obviously content is important. I mean, we have standards and we have to teach, and we're expected to ensure that students master those. But what you see on the learning pyramid is that at the top, you see the word lecture in 5%. And what that represents is that when we provide learning through lecture format and lecture format only, that only about 5% of what we teach kids is retained, or teach anyone, actually, not just students, anyone. And so if we think about school and kind of the traditional nature of school, though many things are changing in the world, our workforce is changing, the skills needed for the workforce is changing, but school tends to remain a little traditional. And so if we are going to develop these skills and these attributes within our students, we can't continue to be traditional. At the bottom, you see that teaching others and practice by doing has a 90 to 75% retention rate of information. And so I'm going to link back to what Dr. Kincannon said. In order to develop these learners that are ready for whatever's next, you may hear about CCMR a lot, college, career, military readiness. We want our students to be ready. We don't want them to be slotted into a certain decision. We want them to have the knowledge and to be strong enough in that base that they're able to choose their path. They don't have to go one direction or another. They choose the path because that's what they want. And so to do that, we really do need to focus on how we teach students. And then as educators, kind of move our focus from teaching to learning and what our students are really learning. And they're not just passive, as it says on the chart, individuals kind of sitting and consuming information, that they're really being offered experiences where they're grappling and struggling and working through information to develop that more meaningful and purposeful learning that will stick with them for much longer. So that's our long-term vision for our education, and then and how we design that in Waco ISD moving forward.
Great, thank you, Dina. I will pass it back to Jared, but I want to thank Dina for that presentation. I think, that empower all, value all has a lot behind it, and there are huge implications for our facilities. So to be efficient, we're going to move forward. Okay, Jared.
Actually, I'm going to pass it over to Doug, and he's going to guide us through the exercise here.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and thank you again, Dina and Dr. Kincannon. Really hit some really critical components there, and just hearing and understanding y'all's vision has us even more excited just to work with y'all and to see what opportunities these facilities have to support that vision. So thank you very much. And so now you'll see here on the screen, this is going to be our activity number 2. And so using the same poll, you'll see there at the top, you can either use, if you're on a computer, you can go to that website, or if you're on your phone or a tablet, you can text OCR 1950 to the number 22333. And if you had done that, I think you should actually already be in that session. And so you can just type your response in that chat. So in 1 to 2 words, if you could, just share what academic priorities do you envision for Waco ISD students that facilities can support? And so, you know, some of these things, they could be, as you know, things such as college and career readiness, or you know, the flexibility of learning environments. Maybe there are some things either that you've seen or you've experienced, what, you know, as far as you know, what those priorities might be that the facilities can truly support. And thank you for bringing up the skills there. I think that's a good list of some things to help kind of spark some thoughts. So I don't know if we have the poll open.
Yes, the poll is open.
Okay. And this will be cool. So it's going to change and move around as everyone kind of puts their stuff in. So we'll keep it open here for maybe a minute or two as people are putting these in. And by the end of it, we'll have a nice big word cloud that pulls together all of our thoughts and ideas. So keep them coming. I see some good ones out there.
For those of you who haven't done a word cloud before, the more that the word appears, the bigger it is. So definitely some similar responses from what Tina presented from the future of technology, but collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking,
creativity. Some great words here. All right, we'll give everyone about another 20 to 30 seconds. Any last thoughts or words? Feel free to put them in. Looks like technology might win out the list.
Equity seems to be growing as does collaboration.
Equity. Yeah, collaboration. Very cool.
And we'll let this poll remain open. So if you still want to add words, feel free to do that here over the next a couple minutes or so. And I think it's really important because as we went today, we really started with the trying to develop an understanding of the conditions, the sticks and bricks of the existing facilities within the district. We're starting to look at vision for our students and what are the opportunities that we want to create from an educational perspective. And now we're going to dive into what can facilities do for us in supporting that educational vision. And that's something that we call 21st century learning environments. So it's really changed a lot. And so I'm going to actually let Casey and Doug run us through that section.
All right, so 21st century learning environments, that's today's classrooms and learning environments. So up on your upper left, you see a 1970s era classroom. Don't worry, this is not your campus. This is not from any of your campuses. And on the bottom right, you see a more modern facility. And, you know, there's some obvious visual differences between them. In the upper left gray one, I mean, we've got that awesome looking TV up there. And we have the teacher up in the front of the classroom, and all the kids are packed in close together and watching and listening, I hope listening. And in the bottom right, you see it's more student centered. And so you see, you know, students working in small groups, perhaps independently. We see the teacher in a rocking chair, sort of working independently, and not independently, in a small group with 2 students. And you see technology is different here. In this one, we have a projector, we have a writing surface, we have variety. In this example, we don't see it, but there might be one-to-one technology, and they're just stashed away to the side. And some of the biggest drivers to this are in the blue boxes here. You know, one is our student population is changing. We're becoming more diverse. We're integrating more cultures in the same facility. And so as we get more diverse, you know, a one-size-fit-all education is not doable. It is not working for a lot of people. We also see the methods of teaching changing. You know, we go from a very teacher-centered, you know, all eyes up front, all facing one way, to more student-centered. And so in any one lesson, you go from like a group of 20 to a group of 5 to an independent, and then back over and turning my chair and moving over here, if you have a chair even. And so there's a lot of things that go into this. And I wanted to, you know, provide a little more detail. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And so here I wanted to reiterate, you know, when we talk about 21st century learning, we're going to highlight a few of the architectural or facilities-based elements that we can influence, but this is based on performance-based research. And so all of these sources, we can fill in some of these sources if you need more of them, but we're looking at performance outcomes. You know, we track it through testing, through attendance, through retention. And not just retention of students, it's also retention of faculty and staff in a school environment. For example, the chart to the upper left, the green areas are all elements that facilities influence. And so you see lighting, temperature, air quality, all those things are physical assets. I mean, your teachers have to do a lot of work, and your staff do a lot, and the students and parents, but the physical environment does have a heavy influence on positive outcomes. And so, you know, I'm not going to read all these statistics here, but testing has shown that everything improves by a good percent with a, you know, a healthier learning environment with lots of natural light, you know, temperature controls, especially if you've got great, I mean, we're in the era of COVID, that clean air you cannot underestimate. And so if we could go to the next slide, we've got just a half dozen of these, and we're going to highlight a few areas. These are some examples are pictures from your schools, and some are examples from our portfolio or other things we're seeing out in the world right now. And we're not saying any of these things have to come to you. We're just kind of showing you what's happening out there. And so in the core academic areas, what you're seeing here, 3 things I want to talk about. The first is transparency. And so it's a little bit subtle here, but in the middle of the upper image, you can see sort of a small horizontal window. And then in the bottom left image, you can see sort of that's a view in and out of the classroom. And that's to facilitate, you know, if I'm a teacher and I need to send a couple kids out in the hall, either to work independently, or these are my trusted kids, I can send them out in a small group. That allows me to sort of passively observe what's going on out there and keep an eye on it. You'll also notice some flexibility happening here, both in terms of furniture solutions and in terms of desks opportunities. And so in the main image, or the large image up top, you see some students working on a countertop and some stools. In the middle, you see a small group gathered together over a table. What you see over on the left is a little gentleman washing his hands, and that is in an elementary school. So in lieu of providing a fixed science lab, this district has elected to generally teach elementary science in the classrooms, but then they move it out to the corridor, not to the corridor, to an expanded hallway area to make that happen out there to facilitate a little bit more flexibility. And then the last thing I wanted to iterate here is project-based learning. I know teachers probably in this call are nodding along here, right? Any parents? And so project-based learning, what you see on the bottom right is, that, and that part of it is sometimes technology, having access in the fingertip access at all times. And what you see in the middle bottom image is, small breakout spaces in the corridor. These are great for interventions with staff and students, but they're also great for small student groups. Here we've got some whiteboards up on the wall. Students can just grab it and they can write their notes and do a small group session and then bring it back to the classroom or wherever they're presenting or discussing it. And so those are the sort of some trends we're seeing in the academic areas. So if we could go to the next one. And then I also wanted to talk about career and technical education. The images here are all high school right now. What we're seeing here is they're becoming a lot more specialized spaces, particularly at the high school. At the middle school, you're seeing some career and technical education, or CTE. It's more in generalized type, I would call them like science lab type spaces. But here up at the high school level, you're getting everything from like detailed studio work, here's a green screen and creating more than just your morning announcements, creating little productions. And then some of these other images are from your facilities. As you know, you've got your Guaca and Guama. These are highly specialized facilities that, they help with local industry collaboration. And in some of the districts we've been working with, we're seeing a growing rate of certificate programs. And so these are capturing the kids that may or may not go to community college, may or may not go to college, may or may not fall right into the industry, but it allows them to graduate with a high school diploma as well as a certificate or two, whether it's automotive trade or health sciences. And sort of, we're seeing a lot more robust activity here. And then I'm going to pass it over to Doug to talk a little bit about some more spaces.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. And just as Casey mentioned, for some of those learning spaces, many of the same principles can be applied to athletics. So we're seeing much more flexibility and variety when it comes to health and fitness education programs. And so taking advantage of these flexible fitness spaces that serve not just PE, but potentially yoga, dance, all of your sports, and then making sure, of course, that these spaces are accessible to all students. So providing the fitness spaces and the training rooms that are available and accessible to all students is becoming increasingly critical. And then, of course, just as we have our fields and our bleachers, we also have our lockers and support facilities. And I'm not sure about everyone on the call, but I think we've all maybe seen a high school locker room here and there. And we have seen a lot of improvement in those over the years. But really looking at how we design these spaces for the rigorous day-to-day use of the high-level athletics programs that especially high schools have nowadays. And so I'll go to the next slide. Thank you. And so visual and performing arts, similarly, these are some of the most engaging and inspiring learning spaces that we have on a campus. And so there's really a lot of good opportunity here when it comes to 21st century visual and performing arts classrooms and spaces. So, thinking about a traditional art classroom, for example, we're seeing environments that not only support drawing and painting and other physical media really successfully, but also start to integrate digital media, 3D modeling, graphic design, these kinds of things are coming into the realm of visual arts. Performing arts, of course, having music practice spaces, adequate practice spaces and storage for the facility and for the program. I was a band kid, and trying to find your locker for your, whatever instrument, it gets tough. And, these programs are becoming more rigorous and more involved and more engaging. And so we're seeing a lot of advancement in the performing arts as well. And then the last slide is for libraries. Another really, really exciting, space in a school, a very center, kind of centric space in the school. There's some really critical components that we look at, and really one of them is flexibility of the library learning environment. So today's libraries, they offer much more opportunities for small group learning, digital media programs, and of course, along with appropriately sized stack space for physical books, which are still critical for student learning. And ultimately, 21st century libraries are those that successfully are integrating technology and flexibility with the academic goals of the campuses and the students. So with that, I will turn it to, I think, the next slide here, which is going to kick off our third activity. And this is going to be a small group activity. So similar to last time, if y'all remember, I think it was I think we've smoothed out some of the kinks. So what's going to happen is we're going to automatically be broken into small groups like we were last time. So you don't have to do anything. You'll automatically get dropped into a different group. And it's going to be about 10 minutes. And at the end of that 10 minutes, there's going to be a 1-minute warning on the last minute. And then at the end, we'll all automatically get brought back into this group. So kind of like it happened last time, it's gonna, I think it's the only way we can facilitate this many people. So it's gonna automatically bring everyone back together. And then we'll have one person will be designated as a reporter in order to bring, what we talk about to the larger group. And then we'll have those, some of these findings typed into the chat. So the question is, what vision do you have for Waco ISD facilities? And so this is a very open-ended question, one designed to, inspire some conversation and some back and forth. So unless there's anything else, Jared, I think we're ready to split into the groups.
I think reading the comments in the chat is really kind of what we're looking for. We've talked about the existing facilities, a little bit about education, and a little bit about what facilities can do for us. And now we want to kind of bring it home and start talking about what this may mean for Waco ISD facilities and groups. And nothing else other than that. So I think we'll have 10 minutes here, and Josh will start breaking this out here, and we'll start discussing as a group.
I'm the PAC 1, so the Community Advisory 1. So I just will start by asking the question. I mean, what are some of the things that you guys see as the visions for our facilities? What do you feel like we need to do? What do they need to look like?
As a principal, I feel like the most important thing is that we have facilities that are flexible. I think this year, more than ever, we've learned that we need to be able to adapt to a lot of different needs. And so having campuses where we've got flexible spaces, flexible furniture, I think it's just really important to the success of any campus because it's going to allow you to meet a lot of different needs.
I think something that was mentioned.
It makes students feel more comfortable, and it's just easier, a better learning environment. I know at some schools we struggle with heat, and just basic necessities. So I just feel like if all of our facilities could just be more warm and inviting and more comfortable for the student, that would help us a lot.
I was going to share, some of the things that were mentioned, student-centered learning, promoting that environment, and then just updating our facilities to today's 21st century, just the technology, and just adapting to even real world situations, real world environments for our students.
I do think it's a necessary thing. I know technology is big on the list. I do think it's important for our classroom environments to be technology rich, especially during a post-COVID situation that we're going to be moving into, so that we can have our classrooms ready. Most of our students are used to seeing you guys on the screen and seeing their lessons like that. And when they come back, there may be some adjustments that they have to make. I would also like to see some environments like classrooms that open to the outside, so that we can have those doorways for remote learners to walk in and be separated from the remainder of the school if they need to.
Okay, I'm going to be vain here. I got a high school senior, and this is Randy Riggs. And we're involved with band, we're involved with audiovisual, we're involved with athletics. And I'm tired of following my kid to all these other campuses and being substandard. Our kids deserve to be a first rate, first class facility, and the kids are great, the families are great, we have a great basis, but we don't have the facilities to support our kids, and that frustrates the snot out of me. Excuse my word choice. Thank y'all.
I think that's why we're in this meeting, so that we can get our facilities where they need to be, where our students and our faculty deserve. Because we definitely need them to be beyond the basic.
That was one thing our group talked about last time was it could be under the heading of competitive, but it's if we don't give our kids here all the advantages that their peers have next door, then they can't compete. It just makes it harder. And you just kind of across the line in extracurricular activities and academics, just that we have inferior facilities is very apparent, especially to those parents who are traveling with their kids. It's been for a long time. I want to say for technology too, technology can really help improve our safety and security of our schools. We have school with integrated cameras with doors that lock automatically, with just all the different ways that technology can help keep your house secure. A lot's changed in the last 10 years, and technology could really help us with that worry about keeping kids safe.
It seems like that might be the safety issue, might be an issue for, we saw images where you had sort of a classroom in a hallway, or we talked about some space that might open to the outside. I suppose that can be secured somehow as well, but that sounds great until you have to lock it down, and we hate to think about that, but it's an issue.
That's a really good point, because I have been part of conversations when that is the key concern about classrooms. For a while, I've seen a school where classrooms have whole walls of windows to the hallway, and what do you do with that? And actually, those were schools that were built pre, all these school shootings, but now they've got to design classrooms that if you have a bunch of windows, you got to have a way to close them and secure them, obscure them, I guess would be, yeah, good point.
Because I was just going to backdoor and say, I work at Carver Middle School, and today we had to do a soft lockdown.
No, you did, yeah.
There was a shooting. The kids heard it. So if I just think, I could just imagine if we had, kids outside at the time that had happened, it definitely wouldn't have been a safe environment. So I think we just have to think about the individual locations of some of the facilities to cater it to those areas.
I also think that right now technology is a huge part of not only learning, but security, the overall, operations of a campus and even our households. The security portion of it, it's sad to say, but before you were safe, you thought you were safe at your house, at the schools and churches. That has changed over the years. So schools were really designed to be, to invite students in. So, the security portion is really, it's really high priority, but also you have to adapt it or design it in a way that that it doesn't look like we're imprisoning students or, so it has to, it's a challenge today in that topic, of the security portion of it. But I do like the open spaces. I think campuses and those common areas should be an area that welcomes students to come in and just participate, like libraries where you can have them either, not only for, but for having study sessions, work on projects, but technology has a huge part in that just because it has to accommodate those needs.
And I think just a standard across the board will help us, our kids too. I work at Carver, but I also mentor students at every middle school and both high schools at WISD. And I noticed that they notice that other campuses have things that their campus doesn't. And it hurts their pride a little bit to see like a kid that goes to Carver to see some things that they may offer at Tennyson or that they may not have, or a kid at Waco High, they might see something that university has or just looks nicer. So that plays in on their emotions, and that makes them less motivated to have pride in their school and pride in their work. So I think if we could just make a standard for all of our facilities so that kids feel no matter what school they go to in WISD that they're getting the best experience, I think that will work wonders for our kids too.
So let's talk about who we want to report out. Would that be Ms. Teakle?
No, it'd be you.
I vote for Ms. Helton.
Miss Helton. Perfect.
Yes, let's give it to Ms. Helton.
I'll do it this time.
I think we're so behind in Waco ISD that part of it is we don't even know what we're missing until you go to one of these other school districts or another school, or just seeing all those pictures and to imagine all the things that we could have. It's exciting, but I feel like it's so long overdue that we don't even know.
I think a lot of the things that you guys are talking about with facilities and with technology really speak to just Maslow's hierarchies of needs. I mean, security, just basic, feeling safe when you come to school and feeling warm and inviting and being a comfortable place to learn. Those are some of the things, especially when we deal with students that have come from a background such as ours. We need them to feel safe and secure and get into that rhythm of just learning. So did you catch all that, Lindsay? Okay.
Yeah, and also studies show that having healthy facilities actually increases the performance of students and staff members. So it is something that is needed.
Okay.
Please mention WISD facilities. Please mention that. I feel like that's a huge disparity we have in our district. It's not a standard that each facility is held to. We have updates on some, and some haven't been touched in years. So I think that's a big thing that I want to make sure we add to the bigger group. Establish a standard.
I'm not going to participate much. I'm just here to help facilitate. So I'm going to just open it up and let y'all speak to the vision for Waco ISD facilities.
Parent types, community types.
What did you say?
I was saying parent types, community type person. We'd love to hear from you guys.
I'll be glad to start. I'm Tiffany Hogue. I am a mom of a 5th grader and a freshman. 5th graders at Hillcrest and freshman is at Waco High. These pictures, of course, are just so inspiring. There's a part of me that thinks, oh my gosh, could we really pull this off? And then, oh my gosh, could we only afford to do this at 2 schools? And then what happens at the rest of the schools? So, I've got a million questions, but in terms of answering the question given to us, what vision do I have? What a gift it would be if we could actually be really proud of our facilities as a community and feel like our facilities really support the amazing work that's happening. Right now, I feel like amazing work happens in the district every day in spite of our facilities. But what if our facilities could actually support everything that these wonderful people are already doing?
Wow, that was an outstanding comment. Outstanding. I totally agree, 100%. Anyone else outside the district on here?
Hi, this is Chris
Us five.
Collins. I'm not a parent, but I'm just looking at it from well, I'm not a parent in Waco ISD, but just looking at it from the business perspective of what we do in economic development. I think, you know, when you look at the facilities, making sure that kids feel inspired to learn and that they're able to reach their full potential, so that they can come out at the end with a successful experience, and that they're either ready to move into the workforce or that they're inspired to continue on with some form of higher education moving forward. I think those are the things that that I, as a parent, in general, I really want to make sure that my kids get that experience. And certainly with the Waco ISD schools, that's something that I hope that they're able to achieve.
Very good.
Okay, I like what I saw. And I know that in some schools in Waco ISD, those settings already exist. And that is one of the big concerns, is the inequity in the designs. So it just, it's important to take into consideration where these facilities are going to be upgraded to look more similar across the board, because we know that these are the best teaching environments to create. So how are we going to, you know, how are we going to make the choices in financing, how to make this happen so that all of the Waco ISD students can experience it?
Yeah,
ditto to that I think I wrote in the word equity like 10 times to make the word bigger. And then someone texted me and said, well, I mean, I told someone that I'd done that, I confessed. And they said, well, what do you have in mind? And I basically was saying just the same access, everybody having the same access to the same kinds of amazing opportunities and buildings and facilities and tools and all the technology available to every child in the district.
Yeah, I'll echo Felicia. I have two kids in the district. One is pre-K 4 and one is first grade. But just, I'd rather see, even as a parent with my kids and thinking with them in mind, I would rather see more, like if their school were to be one chosen to get all these upgrades and all these things that would benefit them, I'd rather them have less of the extra things. It's like across town at Carver, they're not getting anything. Like I would just rather see more equity and honestly focusing on the schools that have historically received like the short end of the stick. And I know that won't be popular with some of our parents who have a louder, who are heard more clearly, have a louder quote unquote voice. But I feel like I feel like wrongs need to be righted, and that's one place to start, is to acknowledge like historically where we've failed families, and then how we can help bring about, because you know the whole idea about equity versus equality, it's not giving every school the same thing. It's like making that opportunity more attainable for people who have been on that the uneven side of the playing field. But I also would like to see, like we saw in the list of skills that employers are looking for, there was a lot about emotional intelligence and conflict resolution and all these like social emotional skills. And I would like intentional spaces for that, where social workers and other people aren't just having to crouch in the hallway, because there is so much on that. I even screenshotted it, the necessary attributes, and a lot of it is like things that are social and emotional skills, self-awareness and stuff like that. So yeah, I would love more intentional space for that in the schools.
And I think that so many of our students are working towards more like project-based learning and small group learning and all those things. And that needs to be happening at all of our schools, and there need to be spaces that facilitate that. And then also I think just both for the fine arts programs and for athletic programs, we need, you know, modern accessible spaces for our students so that they have pride in place and so they can excel, because those programs are also incredibly important to offering our kids the best opportunities we can get at all of our schools.
So I'll say I've heard a few things that I was going to touch on, but I do think that, you know, if we think about our workspaces, we do better and when we get to go to a job site that it has room for us and natural light coming through, and we are free to be creative and think, and we're just in a better mood. And I think that is important for our children as well in their learning environment. I do think that I will just echo what everyone has said about equity. I do think that's important for us to really think through. You know, my student, I drive her across town to Lake Air Montessori, but you know, I want to be able to send her to the neighborhood school, and I know not everyone can drive across town. And so we need to be mindful of that as well when we think of equity. The other thing I'll say is I do think there's a, since we asked about my vision for Waco ISD, I do think there's a unique opportunity with this to think through a community school model and what that can look like, and how you open spaces to community members and public, and what that can actually really look like, and kind of create this collaborative partnership approach to that. And I think with the intention of design and the way that you can do that, you can really create some unique opportunities for that to take place as well.
I echo all of that, especially with Mr. Carpenter on this call. I would add, in terms of a vision, you know, who knows what we're actually going to be able to recommend and what we'll be able to fund. But I hope that as part of this process, we can have some conversation about, are there ways for the campuses to share space in a better way? One thing that's come to my mind just by the age of our kids is they work so hard on these middle school fine arts performances, and then it's just really hard to fully appreciate that in a cafeteria. So are there ways that we could go to Waco High or University High for a night to hear the great choir concert? And I don't know, maybe those stages are constantly used by the high schoolers, but I know we're not going to get new everything. So is there a way for us to really think through like the best way of using the good spaces that we already have and may build in the future for all students?
Right. And I echo that too, but maybe it's not so much that they're attached to one of the high schools. Maybe we actually have a facility that is a fine arts facility for the district.
Amazing.
You know, that is a centralized location.
Yeah. I will jump in. We got 15 seconds before we all get kicked out and go back to the big group. So does anybody want to volunteer to be the spokesperson?
I say Hope or Tiffany.
I didn't take notes. I could try.
Yeah, you should. I was spokesperson last time.
Okay.
All right, Tiffany.
All right, I'll try, guys. Apologies if I forget something.
Nope, I think, it looks like we're running over a little bit. So maybe they gave us some buffer so that we would wrap up on time. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, go ahead. What can you remind us what the question was?
Sure. So the question is, what vision do you have for the Waco ISD facilities? And really kind of, you know, as you've started to get to understand the condition of the facilities, what opportunities they're having, your knowledge, we'd love to just kind of hear from y'all about what you could see happening for the future of the facilities. Jump in.
A couple of things. We have been parents of WISD kids for about 16 years now. No, not 16, 14 years now. And I mean, of course, a couple of my very most passionate things about the facilities. We have Hillcrest PDS, which is an elementary school from pre-K to grade 5. And I'm very concerned about wanting to see that school continue in the community, to not be moved, to expand. I mean, we're pretty much kind of splitting at the seams. But I would love to see Hillcrest expand in its current location. Also, we have a 10th grader at Waco High, and we have lived here in the community way before we had children, and it's just time to update Waco High. You know, we've had friends that moved to other districts, and my husband and I actually did not go to private school here in Waco or public school here in Waco. We went to private school, but when we started having children, it was so important for us, for the diversity, for supporting our community, to stay in the district. And so it has just been, even before we had children, like I said, 30 plus years ago, it was like, you know, Waco High, it's time to expand and to make it more competitive with the other districts that surround us, where families are moving, and we're here to stay, and we want to do what we can to help. So
I would say that I think it might be a good priority for the school, for the facilities to, one, be places that encourage creative learning, as well as provide multi-use. As we continue to see how things are changing in our community, I think it's helpful for us to build stronger partnerships so that we all aren't building individual facilities for individual purposes. I think there's some economies of scale to be gained in having joint use facilities.
Who would those be joint use with in your idea?
Whether it be from performing arts to, that's probably the biggest thing is, you know, from a performing arts standpoint, to have a facility or a school that has space that could be utilized multi-use. It could be, quite frankly, it could be a financial enhancement for the school district as well, in order to you know, either lease out that space when it's not being used or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so there's been some conversation in the community about a fine arts facility. I've forgotten the name of the group that's leading that work. You might know.
Keen.
Say it again.
Keen.
Okay.
K-E-N, Keen.
I'd like to add that in addition to what Ms. Clark Martin and Ms. Emerson said, you know, the basic function of any facility, school facility, has to be a safe and secure environment. And if you think about it and akin it, you know, liken it to your home, right? It's a safe space. It's a, you hope to, I mean, you don't want me decorating, but you want it to be a place of pride, right? A place where you want to be. You gotta remember, our staff and our students spend the majority of their awake time in our buildings. And we want that to be a place where they feel safe, they feel secure, they feel valued.
Yes.
And in turn, I think we will be able to create some of the elements that both the ladies just spoke of, and instill a sense of pride in our students. And I think that, you know, we are in competition, so to speak. Things are different than they were 20 years ago, and we have to keep those things in mind. So I think all of that encompasses, at least, you know, in my small mind, very important elements in terms of vision.
I appreciate you said that, because Dr. Carrier just got to Waco ISD this year, and I got a phone call that said, hey, can you come over here? Not from him, but Dr. McDermott called me and said, he's got some real concerns. And of course, I had already been through the Carver facility and went back over and met with him. And, you know, I I think the building needs to facilitate that value of kids and show that care. And when your bathrooms are run down and the building is run down, I think it shows we don't value as much as perhaps in some other places. And so I appreciated your comments and a higher expectation for our kids, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Those pictures that Jared and his team showed really embody what I think is what we want for our kids, right? We want those colorful, bright spaces that have flexible seating, there's good lighting, there's some space to spread out and do the work and work with others. And I think those pictures captured it beautifully. Of course, I think I was involved with one or two of those pictures, right, Jared?
Yeah.
An elementary school I was a part of designing. But I think our kids are worthy of that. And, you do want modern facilities. Waco High School is competing for students. I think Anna talked about, being committed to staying in the district, and Dr. Curiator talked about competition. There's a lot of competition in this area. And we look at kids, and I think facilities is a way to demonstrate, really to attract families because the buildings look inviting and show just really demonstrates that we care and value these kids.
I think Dr. Kincannon, to add to that, we do want folks to choose us, but then when we look at our teaching staff, and thinking about recruiting and retaining them, and as Dr. Carrier said, people, I'm still at work right now. We spend hours, at work. And so communicating that culture of high expectations, but also nice places to be, it feels different, and you come in with a different mindset. And, obviously it's not possible right now to rebuild an elementary school for every elementary school that look like some of those in the pictures, but there are things that we can do to help those learning environments at least move closer to that. And I also think that in thinking about recruiting and retaining our teachers, if we are going to be asking of them to be ongoing learners and to really develop and perfect their craft, then providing them with the tools to be able to do so is critical. Right now it's difficult sometimes for them to do some of the things that they may want to do because of access to, whether it's space or technology or whatever. And it just makes it hard. And so if we want them to go in that direction and we're going to grow them in that way, then I think, that communicates that whole picture to them.
We're going to run out of time. Alfred, are you willing to be our reporter?
Oh, no, I want to share. Someone else can report. I came late. I'm so sorry. But I do think that the health aspect of it, having something, especially on a day like today, having the light, those pictures really reflect. But I think I would hope that kids would go to school thinking that, hey, this is the place that I want to be. And it's good for your health to have that beauty.
Looks like we may have the final little minute here before we leave the breakouts. Alfred, Anna, or Deecha, would one of y'all report out for our group number 3? That was like a volunteer. I saw it, Anna.
No, it's really not, because I just, I'm just not going to be able to encapsulate like everything wonderful that you all said. I should have been taking notes, but I came late tonight, so.
Well, if it would help, I could shoot you some notes in the chat. Anybody else want to volunteer? Deidre or Alfred?
You send me some notes. I got it.
Okay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yay, our hero.
There's a sense that somebody
has paid for me to have this beautiful place, and it opens up a student and a teacher's I think willingness to take risk and to be excited about learning. So I have a vision that our facilities will demonstrate respect for the neighborhoods in which those facilities are in, and the families and students and faculty and staff who are in those buildings.
Instill pride in the students.
Say again?
Instill pride in the students.
Yes, agreed, K. Paul.
That was really
Yeah, I think,
nice.
you know, to kind of piggyback on what Tiffany said, just kind of having a wow factor when you walk on campus as opposed to a factor. And that comes from the second you get out of your car and see the building. If you're, as long as your shocks are still working in your car because the potholes in the parking lot. So, I mean, so much, even the landscaping, there's so much shade because of these old trees, which I love old trees, but if the campus looks just sort of like dirt because grass can't grow, and you walk in and, you know, it's clearly that the school has been, it's from a time warp from about 1956, and it has, people were shorter then, so ceilings are, and I'm kidding, I don't know, that's not true, but the ceilings are low, there's very little natural light. I mean, it just, and I think it's demoralizing as well for the students and for the teachers, and yeah, it's just, and to also Tiffany's piece about equity, you know, I can drive on Highway 84 about 15 minutes and find schools that look completely different. And that's a major, it shows, you know, money and facilities communicate what we value. And if Waco is going to value its students and value education, it needs to be reflected in what our facilities look like. That communicates a great deal to the students, to the teachers, to the parents, faculty, staff, everybody.
I think Aaron mentioned parking lots, and I also say that we have to have welcoming environments. And right now, parking at some of our places is a little bit tough. And so we say all the time how we want parents and community members on our campuses, but then it makes it really rough when they don't know where to enter or how to park or how to get there. Signage.
It also, there's so many times, obviously, we have to park in residential neighborhoods, which is kind of a bit of a unhospitable thing to those neighbors. It makes their lives difficult every time there's a school play. Not to say nothing of parking in a parking lot that's across the street from the school, so you have to cross a busy street when, you know, it's just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
I just started thinking about equity from a different standpoint, just from a learning standpoint of people that might need to, from a neurodiversity standpoint, people that have to learn differently, you know, different chairs kind of have a different impact on kids. Especially someone else had mentioned like the beanbag chairs, like some people might do better closer to the floor, you know, or if they're forced to have to sit up, like those empty chairs, that makes a big difference. I also think it makes a big difference from a safety factor. I think you can kind of, when you have these newer facilities, you just, whether it's real or implied, you just kind of feel a little bit safer, like, you know, it's more current with those types of things, especially the way that schools have changed in the last 20 years. At least, I think it makes a big difference when students feel safer. It makes it easier to learn.
I actually agree with what everyone is saying in terms of kind of that wow factor and that pride. And I think, you know, Aaron, I think you're actually very right. You know, money and facilities really does what we value. I think what is really exciting, to kind of speak to your point of this neurodiversity, you know, as a former teacher, I mean, I had one student who literally would never sit in his chair. And so he would do his work standing up most of the time, which was great as long as he did his work. But I think some of that flexible space is really, it's really exciting, I think, because it does offer, I mean, there's so many options of things that you can do in terms of grouping, in terms of kind of projects. I mean, there's just kind of that flexible space, and just space in general is really, really valuable in a school from kind of from more of a teacher perspective, in my opinion.
So I want to say something to that, Stephanie. I think that thinking back on that slide where the different kinds of costs, I hope that we as a district will take into account the need to train teachers to use those spaces. If they're going to be teaching in different spaces, then they need to know how to adequately and effectively use those spaces. You can't teach the same way as you do in these old square classrooms. And I think that's another component of cost that we probably need to consider, because we're talking about major multi-generational shifts from what we have to what we hope to have.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
And I think, to that point, having flexibility built in, because what we think is state of the art now, they had that picture of the green screen and all that stuff. I mean, the overhead projector was a big deal when that first came out. So I think it's just, making sure that there's some amount of flexibility in the space in terms of being able to access all those Wi-Fi access points, all the cables that run it. I mean, there's in 10 years, all that stuff's going to be obsolete. So making sure that there's access panels that all that kind of stuff is going to be important.
Sorry, I just see the 1 minute warning.
One of the things that I just want to get in this conversation somehow is the fact that a lot of schools have seen areas that were like projects that were started in the past. It looks a lot of times like community gardens that then get sort of forgotten. And so I wonder if there's I don't know, I'm just making that point. If there's a facility way to address that so that it'd be easy to start something like that and then scrap it if somebody forgets it or moves on, that'd be possible.
That's a great point. You all have 30 seconds left. Stephanie, did you get what you needed to report back for your group? You got some great input.
Yeah, got a lot of great stuff. I think so. I think got some stuff.
Anybody else in the group have something to say, or can you add it and identify it with group 4 in the chat when we get back to the full group? Because I know everybody has stuff to talk about.
Great job, y'all. And thank you, Stephanie, for being the reporter. You scored a week.
Thank you.
I love that idea for breaking out into small groups, or it was mentioned that you have to have an intervention with a student, having a comfortable, cozy corner or a nook to sit down with a kid and chat with them. I think one of our last, or I guess it was only our first discussion, it was brought up just family space. When your family comes to visit you at school, where do they meet you? In the principal's office or the cafeteria or a chair outside? Is there a space where families can sit and talk for whatever reason? So I'm looking not just for what it feels like in the classroom, but what other spaces a parent might see or a kid may be in other than just a classroom setting there on the campus.
I like all of the things I was hearing about, the space and the light. And I don't know if they're talking about LEED certification or not, but those kind of things make a good environment, and also places for students to collaborate and the technology to do that too.
I enjoyed looking at the goal setting, maybe. So like in that athletic area, while they're like pumping weights and looking at the stadium, I feel like students can, look at what they're working toward and maybe create a winning team, or, you look good, you feel good, and you're making progress. Same thing with the band. If that band hall has windows that they can see the field, also they can strategically start planning, their alignment and their footing and all of those things. So I think seeing those goals instead of being confined in those brick buildings.
So I think if we have all of this, it's wonderful. And I think that's a way we can attract families. And I think also that's another way we can keep families here in Waco. And that's, we lose them usually at the end of elementary and middle school. And then, so, I mean, we could just keep them during this time. That's where my head's going.
One of the pictures that I was really taken by that I thought was neat was the photograph of the students in front of a green screen. That's just that real life learning and technical skill in the workplace. I thought was interesting. I don't want to dominate, but I do have a question for Lisa. Lisa, what do you hear or see anecdotally why families are leaving Waco ISD before high school?
You know, they leave before high school. Some of it is facilities. It is. I mean, you went to Lake Air. Carrie went to Lake Air. Who else did? I mean, I went to Lake Air. I mean, pretty much, I mean, they've done some upgrading on it, but it's still the same school. You know, we went to Hillcrest. It's still the same. I mean, there's been upgrades, but I just think, you know, around this area here in Central Texas, there's a lot of new schools. You know what I mean? And I think some of it's that. And then on the flip of it, though, we get a lot of students back like their 10th grade year. That's what's interesting also. So that's another flip of it, though.
Well, we get them back in 9th grade, Lisa. We do start getting them back. We lose them in middle school mostly.
Yeah.
I've seen that in my group of friends as well. It's kind of interesting. They get scared off at some point for not very well-defined reasons at junior high. And we've had a good number of them come back and rejoin my kids, you know, in high school that we knew in elementary. And then, you know, I wish I had him on tape saying it, but one guy said he wasn't even going to give his younger kids the opportunity to go anywhere but Waco High, because they'd tried private for a while and apparently concluded it was a waste of money and came back. You know, I would observe, I think, and not that our facilities can't stand some improvement, they certainly can, but I think a lot of our competitors, especially in the charter school environment, they've got terrible facilities compared to us. And so it's, you know, there's a lot of different reasons going on. You know, I don't know that we can whip all of it with just facilities, but you know, we've done research and studies on that, Lisa, and I think it perceived behavioral issues, things like that. But it's a perception problem a lot more than a reality, I think.
So, and one good thing, you know, was the TRE, and Stephanie, that's another thing that has brought kids back, the dual credit classes. That's a big plus for us in the AP classes. I don't know, we could go on and on and on about this. I mean,
yeah, there's a very definite correlation between the TRE and doing the dual credit, free dual credit, and the increases at secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else want to go back to 7th grade shop class, or is that just me?
It was great when we were at Lake Air.
I learned everything I needed to know in 7th grade shop class. Okay.
I loved my home economics class. I think it was at Waco High.
We don't do any of that anymore.
Do it. See, no more.
University Middle, Mr. Thomas.
There you go. Exactly.
I think I still have my vase I made in home ec.
Oh, how fun.
I got my clock from Coach Falls' class in 8th grade.
See?
Those are great experiences.
Those are great.
To understand how things are made. Now, Cheryl will tell you that kind of education is more expensive, right, Cheryl?
Not to make a ashtray.
Well,
believe me, that welding stuff over at Guam is a lot more expensive than making that ceramic ashtray.
Okay, how about a wooden box? I think I got away with one of those.
Your CO2 race car.
Yeah, there's practical physics. We could call it practical physics. Is that I'm not sure that can happen here in this project, but I think we've collectively been neglecting that the last 30 years. Man, somebody's got to build all this housing we're going to need, right?
Well, a lot of those things are what keeps kids in school.
I get on the top of my screen is Israel. Israel, what is your vision for Waco ISD?
Mainly for our kids could have better facilities to engage with learning and other students.
Awesome. Next on my Philly.
I love what they were saying about having flexible arrangements. I think I am concerned about us making some big purchases or big decisions and then it becoming outdated very quickly. So I love the things they were saying about have it be adaptable in the future. I don't know for sure how all that will play in, but I think making sure we're keeping that in mind is really important. And spaces that can be used for multiple things. I think we talked about that at our last meeting too, of the cafeteria auditorium issue and how that was not really functioning for a lot of schools, but trying to keep something like that in mind.
That's awesome. Awesome. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over. I just thought we'd make the best of the time we've been given.
Somebody's got to take over. I'm glad you did it.
I have, please don't kill me, Laquan. Is that how you say your name, Mr. Higgs?
That's me. Well, my thing is, my vision is for them to have an environment that isn't just so enclosed into the building. That's just where I stand with that. I would like to have, just say for instance, like we talked about last time, I would like for them to have a separate environment outdoors to be able to go out, where teachers can go outdoors. Like today was a beautiful day at school today. The teachers could have went outside in a separate environment, maybe it's covered, but it's outdoors. It has shaded, and they can teach a lesson out there. That's where I stand with it. Just giving them an opportunity to be able to do something different instead of just being closed into those four walls inside of the classroom. That's where I stand with that.
Awesome. What about Miss Isabel Lozano?
Hi. So with me, I just think we're in a building that was built in 1950. I'm at Kendrick Elementary. Our school used to be open from the outside, so they built walls. So we don't have AC or heat in our hallways. So in the winter, we all have to wear our coats and jackets because it's freezing. And in the summer, we're just hot. It's so hot. So it's just to us really at this point, just a modern facility with a state-of-the-art options. I think our kids deserve the best. We want to attract the families that have left Waco ISD that are either charter or online. So we want to bring them back, and we want to have our students and our community deserve up-to-date facilities.
Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you guys didn't have just the basic necessities in the hallway. Yeah. Josh, I have you next on.
Oh, thanks so much, Hilda. Yeah, my kids go to Hillcrest, and it seems like it was built a similar generation as Principal Lozano's. It seems like a 1950s building, and I'm no architect or designer, interior designer or anything like that, so I don't have a lot of grand vision, but I do know that natural light is very nice in terms of an educational environment, and room for creative, collaborative space. I also do agree too in terms of just attractiveness of the facility, that we are in a competitive educational environment, and there's kind of the internal competition versus like Rappaport and Harmony, and right now online schools, but also with Midway, China Spring, some of our suburban communities, school districts. So I think that there's all kinds of benefit to upgrading our facilities, many of them as we can. I do think Waco High is kind of a flagship along with university that should see some priority, but my kids are both in elementary school. I'd love to see those old elementaries upgraded as well. Thanks for letting me speak.
Absolutely. Great points. I have Gretchen next.
Yeah, hi, this is Gretchen Bronstein. I think I actually have more questions if we could pose that to them as well. I heard him mention lockers when he was talking about the music room. I'm assuming lockers are a thing of the past in general. I mean, I just know from my children's 2 schools, they've never been used as far as students putting their books in them and that sort of thing. So I'm just curious if that's a space, that I didn't notice them in the pictures. I mean, maybe for the specials, yes, I can understand that, but just the day-to-day uses. I know my children have never used them on the middle school or high school levels. Also, I wonder, are there any students currently involved? Is there a student panel of any sort that's giving feedback on what they see today, and then they go to other schools for competitions or what have you and see things that may interest them? But as far as my vision, I think of like calming colors, the light, all the things I think that have already been addressed. But also, this is just me pre-COVID, and now there is COVID. Easy to clean, something that looks clean and can be done efficiently and well. I don't know if they want to look into automatic, faucets and toilets, or if that's just something else that's going to break in the end and have to be repaired, and that's a maintenance issue. I'm not really sure, but I think everything else has been addressed. I just wanted to have those other 2 questions maybe asked, especially about lockers for space.
Awesome. Those are great points. Norman, Mr. Manning, would you like to have an input on this?
The only thing that I want everybody to realize is that Waco Independent School District is landlocked. So we don't have a lot of space to go out and eminent domain is not a popular thing to do if you want to expand the school. And one of the questions that we have discussed, if we do build a school, do we build it up? And once, if you're talking about building the school, that it may be good for the junior high and the high school students, but I don't think a 2-story school would suffice for elementary kids. And like I say, and the other issue that we have to also keep, that technology moves so fast that a school you build tomorrow may be outdated 5 or 6 years from now. But that's just the way technology moves and everything like that. But all the ideas that people are giving right now, they are good. The lighting situation, spacing situation, I totally agree with all of that.
Awesome. Community Advisor Committee 8, I didn't know if you wanted to.
Yes, I can. I'm more on the architect design team side, but I also work with the school district to kind of help facilitate some of these meetings. So, a lot of the things that we're hearing, I can say those are great points that Gretchen made about the lockers and the space utilizations, and are we using that? And if we are not using it, how can we repurpose those particular items? So I think those are great things to bring up to the team as well. I can also tell you that, along with Waco ISD, we've worked with other school districts and are receiving a lot of student input too, as far as, what they're kind of wanting to see in their facilities, because they are the ones that are out there visiting other campuses, seeing everything and kind of bringing those things. So those are things that we will do as we work through this process as well. It's get some of that student focused groups and get some of their ideas as well, and how we can best, utilize and upgrade the facilities that we have.
Great. That's great. The only thing I would want to add to all of that, which I think I agree with pretty much everything that was said, would be the safety. The safety of going after COVID and still having some of those threats of people trying to come in, making sure that all our schools have appropriate boundaries for people not to be able to have such quick access to students' classrooms, etc. And I'm the crazy mom who's like, I need to know exactly what the tornado routes are, and I want to make sure that our buildings are strong enough to withstand a storm in the event that there is a tornado during, or any kind of natural disaster during school, that the that the schools will withstand. And I think that goes back with making sure that our schools are updated and up to date, and especially the older ones, to make sure that they're strong enough to withstand that. That would be it. Yeah, we have 20 seconds, guys. We did it.
Yeah, we're group number 6.
Okay.
When they want us to report, and do we kind of identify somebody who will kind of report back what we discussed?
I can
nominate Ilda.
Sorry. I can do
But
it.
I was gonna say, I second that.
I've seen that transform my own workspaces when people have space. And it's kind of the opposite, per square foot. So it just made me wonder, is there like a formula that we work with? Like we got X number of students, therefore we need X number of square feet. Are there formulas that guide this kind of development? And if so, how do we build in the kind of things, April, that you're talking about, or James, the different kinds of spaces that you need for technology? Because it calls for, I just know at home on my desk, when I got a device and a notebook, and all of a sudden my space issues, change exponentially. I go from needing a desk to needing a table. I don't know about the rest of you, but that kind of thing.
So I'm an architect and I can speak to the space thing. There are minimum standards from the state, and I say minimum, right? Because obviously we would like more. And some of the trends that we didn't discuss today is one of them is spaces working hard. We build these huge cafeterias that are used for 2 hours out of the day. How else can we use that space? And so sort of some of those considerations and trends. So it's not just larger classrooms, it's also making better use. A lot of the images we showed in the corridors, they truly are corridors, but they're not, you're double loaded with a classroom door exiting to a classroom door. We sort of ebbed and flowed them a little bit, or created little pockets for small gatherings that we can see, right? Because we don't want kids going into some deep hidey hole, no teacher supervision.
So 2 things that really kind of struck me is the natural lighting. So the deaf population, who are always receptively seeing everything and taking in all the information, the lighting is really hard on their eyes, and they become more tiresome, which then, they may not get all the information that's trying to be conveyed. Another thing I think about is safety. And I know this might sound weird, but I've thought about it. If they're in the restroom and there's a fire alarm going off, how are they going to know? And so it's just having lights. There doesn't even have to be sound in it. But if there's a fire, a certain colored light goes off. If there's an intruder in the building, a different colored light goes off. And I'm sure that you all know, but even when we're providing to all students, everyone benefits from that. And so that's just something I was thinking about.
I think many of the things that you've echoed here are things that I would also had on my list. But one of the things I'm also thinking about is I hope that we can get away from so many satellites or those outside buildings and outside areas where we sort of get disjointed in the overall concept of teaching in an integrated fashion. So, I know you have to have a little of that at the high school level, but I think at elementary and middle schools in particular, if we could get away from that idea of having kids so segregated outside of the building. And one of the things I thought about too, we're getting more kids when Mr. Stewart talked about special needs kids, some areas of serenity, because some kids can't take a lot of stimuli, and especially like in the cafeteria. So thinking about those kids and having some areas of where they can really be in their own environment from throughout the day as they need it.
We got about 25 seconds. I'm gonna try to wrap it up. The main thing that I heard was mainly about space. Spacing was the main thing, and then how we can try to make that work for our special pops, our ELLs, and our deaf ed students, along with incorporating technology and some kind of area of tranquility. So I just summarized that in those main things.
And natural light.
All right, natural light, yeah.
And real world opportunities.
Real world opportunities.
Well done. Well done.
Yep. Doug, you want to facilitate?
Sure. I was just going to say, I think we're going to do kind of the same thing we did last time. I hope everyone remembered their group number this time. I did forget to mention that. I apologize. But I will go ahead and turn it over to the and Jared, correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to go group by group, or are we posting in the?
Yep.
Okay.
So just start group one, and we'll roll from there.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Hilton. I'm speaking for Group 1. One of the big common themes that we discussed was pride, and we want to make sure that our facilities are something that our students take pride in. They see the disparities between the different campuses, and so we would really like to advocate for a standard facility expectations across the district. And then they also see the disparities between our facilities and the facilities at neighboring districts. And so we really want our students to have something that they're proud of. We also talked about just making sure that we're meeting, basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we have environment that's welcoming, that's it's designed for safety, especially in these crazy times. We want to make sure that technology is equitable access to technology for any student and any staff member. And then we want to make sure that spaces are flexible, because we know that things can change quickly. And so we need our campuses need to be flexible so that we can meet the needs of whatever's happening at the time.
Great. Appreciate you sharing. Let's see, let's roll over to group number 2.
I'm Tiffany Hogue. I think I'm representing group 2. Please don't jump in if I'm wrong. We had a great conversation, sure, like the other groups. I think our chief focus was equity. We have a great concern, and I'm sure we share that across this committee, to make sure that any new facilities, any renovated facilities are done in the most equitable way possible. We also talked as well as Group 1 about spaces that we can really be proud of. We feel like our students and staff and faculty are doing excellent work in spite of some kind of old and rundown facilities many times. And wouldn't it be amazing if the facilities could actually support and even enhance the great work that's already being done? We also had some conversation around shared space, and this went in 2 directions. One was that one of our members had a vision for space that we might be able to share in some new and creative ways with community groups, and to kind of think with more collaboration in mind. And then we also talked about, for example, maybe we can't necessarily have a fine arts space at every middle school, but maybe there's a new fine arts space that is built, and then lots of campuses could share that space. So we know that there are a number of performances and other things that are done in less than ideal circumstances. And so if we could think about sharing the good space we already have in new ways, or sharing new space in great ways across the campus, but also with our community partners, that would be wonderful. Thanks.
Awesome. Really appreciate you sharing, Tiffany. Thought it was great feedback, and we'll probably hear some similar trends here with group number 3, and Deidre is going to be our volunteer.
Yes, this is Deidre Emerson, and I'm representing group 3. And in our group, we talked about Hillcrest PDS and maintaining that campus, as well as Waco High and updating it. Because we know that we are in competition, not only for students, but as well as for teachers, and making sure that we have environments that that encourage learning, also we talked about multi-use facilities that are safe and secure, that include and create value along with pride. And then make sure that they the atmosphere is one that encourages learning through natural light and color. And we talked about the furnishings and how those things impact the overall learning environment.
Awesome. Appreciate you supporting our group, Deidre, and we'll roll over to group number 4.
Hi, Stephanie Cordeweg here. We talked a lot, kind of similar themes. I think one of the big things that seemed to kind of resound in our group was kind of that sense of pride. And I think someone said, we don't want just the sense of pride for the students, but for the neighborhood, for that really everyone is excited about the school, kind of that wow factor, even to the landscaping, kind of just your first impression entrance into these campuses, have the landscaping nice and grass, obviously, where there's lots of shaded trees and maybe not that much grass. One of the main things we said was, money and facilities really do show our community what we value. And so really, giving a great first impression, a welcoming environment. One of the other things that we had talked about was new facilities that are updated, usually are updated in terms of safety. And so these new facilities really do kind of communicate a safety factor, that they're safe. We talked about, again, some of that flexibility within the space, but also flexibility in making sure that there is, with technology, making sure that, hey, Wi-Fi is available through every kind of nook and cranny in the campus, that, that really is, we're up to date with our technology, and then in that flexibility, kind of leaving room for kind of the new and improved, because we don't know what 10 years down the road, what teaching is going to look like, or what new things are going to come on the horizon. Two kind of things were, one of them was, if we have these spaces for teachers that are flexible, really allowing the training for teachers. So just kind of a side note in this whole process, hey, we're going to have to really think about training for teachers to be able to use those spaces and how to use them. And then some of our community gardens have seemed to be forgotten in the schools. And so, just taking a look at those spaces too. And if I left anything out, please chime in.
Well, it's definitely one of those things that I've never, thinking about Wi-Fi and getting it outside the building, that we've learned that access anywhere, anytime has become very different in the last year than it has ever before. So thank you for sharing, Steph, and we'll move on to group number 5.
I'm Lisa Saxonian, and I'm the dean at Waco High School. In group 5, talked about, they like the pictures of the schools that you showed, the classrooms, the natural light, the interactiveness. And someone brought up the more space in the hallways, because their daughter had said, there's really no space in the hallways right now. And the flexibility and the welcoming again. Talked about the auditorium and the pods in the hallways. And then we just brought up about what was it like when, we had shop way back, and you had home ec way back. So then we just talked about the last TRE that Waco had was the dual credit, and that was very welcoming to others, outside the district, to bring their students here.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Lisa. And anything else from group 5? Or if not, we'll move on to group number 6.
I'll be representing group 6. So we had several things come up on ours, a little bit of everything. First, little consciousness of the expenses that we'll be taking on this, making sure that they're being used as equitably, and making sure that we prioritize the things that are more urgent within our school district. It was brought up that certain middle schools, some of the middle schools are some of the older buildings. I'm sorry, not the middle schools. Some of the elementary schools are some of the older buildings, and that even in South Waco Elementary, we were told that there's no AC or heating in the hallway, so they have to wear their coats outside of the classroom. Things like that probably will fall into prioritizing. Also, natural light, making sure that the new facilities provide not only natural light, but a versatility in the usage of each room. So as we change, like someone was mentioning, home ec and things that used to be more of a priority for people to know, to learn, it could be different things now as the times change. Is also brought up question about the lockers. Do we really need those? Making sure that those are things that are really in use in the arts facilities, for example. Another question was asked as student panel. Is there a student panel that would be asking the questions that are giving input into what would actually take place in these new buildings? And upgrades, and also safety, making sure that we are staying up with the times and safety, making sure that there's barriers for those that are not supposed to be in schools, and making sure that our kids are safe in the classroom. Also during natural disasters, that withstand those kinds of things as well. And that's group 6. If I missed anything, please feel free.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Ms. Sabito. Group 7.
All righty. James Stewart, principal at Waco High School. I guess one of the main things that we spoke about as far as dealing with the mission and the vision of Waco ISD, one of the main things that stand out is how we're going to work for all students. And the main thing that stood out in our discussion was space. One of the phrases I wrote down, it says space communicates empowerment. And just understanding how that space is going to work for each individual student. We have a large population of ELL students, English language students, SPED students. Even Mrs. Mary talked about the deaf ed and how can we integrate those things into our new spaces that, like if a deaf ed student is in the bathroom, how would they know that there is like someone that would come in the building, or if there's a fire alarm, if there would be a different color coded system. So students in that area would know, and how we can make sure that we're reaching the needs of all of our students, maybe by offering real world situations, having that flexibility in the classrooms to have real world situations and collaboration taking place. And this just that flexible classroom arrangement. So students would have that, that flexibility to move around and do those things as far as that. And so that was one of the biggest things that we got out of our group, as far as not necessarily just bigger hallways and those things, which we need at Waco High, but just making sure that we have that space to be on a, more of a 21st century, the new age school. When you look at these schools that are in our district, we see that they already have those things in place, but we're catching up. And so making sure that we have that in place for all of our students here in Waco ISD as well. So.
Awesome. And I believe that was the last group that we had today. So appreciate everybody sharing out, and definitely heard very similar trends. I think everybody mentioned natural light within all of their groups. So pretty amazing. Definitely something that we want to ensure that we have lots of within the building. But creating pride, heard that several times, but then also equity and creating support to bring it parallel, not only within Waco ISD, but also competing for students within the district. So great, exciting things to hear here as we move forward. And then thank you, Jessica, for pulling that up. So this really, we wanted to give a moment. If anybody had any questions, we've kind of answered those in the chat as you're going through there. But if we aren't able to get those today, be sure to note it as a parking lot along the way. And exactly that, we will be wrapping up here. So we have meetings again. We will meet again in 2 weeks. So on February 8th will be our next meeting. And otherwise, we'll take any questions or feedback. And otherwise, we really thank y'all for, again, a great night and participation. And I will turn it over to Dr. Cannon or Ms. Tikel to provide any additional closing thoughts.
Yeah, I saw we had a question about getting the slides from this evening. I'll be happy to send those out to the committee, and I'll do a better job of getting you a reminder about our meeting next time. But I really appreciate your attendance. We did have great attendance this evening. I can see 76 of you on the call, so that's fantastic. I don't have anything else this evening, and I'll pass it to our board president.
No, I don't either. Thanks, everybody, and look forward to learning with everyone next time. With that, I think we're done. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.